In this video, we're going to be learning about the 5-number summary and how to represent them visually in a box plot. So the 5-number summary, you already actually know how to calculate this. You learned how to do it in your last video. The 5-number summary is the minimum, median, and maximum of a data set, as well as Q1 and Q3, so the locations of the first and the third quartiles. And we can represent a 5-number summary graphically in what's called a box plot, or a box and whisker plot. And so what a box and whisker plot does is it makes a box from the first quartile to the third quartile and marks out the median in the middle. So the width of the box shows the interquartile range. And then we go from the end of the box, we draw a whisker to the minimum and a whisker to the maximum. Any values that are outliers are marked with little asterisks or stars. Sometimes they're marked with circles, but any sort of marking outside of the range represents an outlier. So let's look at an example of how to make a box plot. Here we have the number of grams of fat in McDonald's beef sandwiches. So the first thing that we need to do in creating a box plot is we need to label and scale our axes. I see that my data vary from 9 to 46, so I'm going to make my box plot axis from 0 to 50 just to give myself a little extra room. I am measuring grams of fat, so I need to label that clearly on my axis. From here, I can calculate my median, Q1 and Q3, which I did in the last video, and I'm going to make a box going from Q1 to Q3, so from 19 all the way up to 29. From there, I'm going to draw in a line for the median. The median in this case is 26, so I just draw that vertical line in. After this, I need to draw in my whiskers, or my lines from the end of the box, out to my minimum and maximum values that are not outliers. So you'll notice that I marked this 46 with an asterisk here because we calculated in the last video that this was going to be an outlier. Recall that we got that by doing 1.5 times the IQR, right? And we calculated that any numbers that were greater than 44 were going to be outliers. So in this case, 46 is an outlier. So I draw my whisker out to 31 because that's the largest value in my data set that's not an outlier. And I draw my smallest, my whisker down to my minimum, which is 9. There's no low outliers in this case. The last thing I need to do is I need to mark my outliers with an asterisk so that 46 is way out there above my maximum. So this week we're going to be doing comparisons of box plots, and when we compare box plots we need to always describe our SOCs, shape, outlier, center, and spread. So I'm going to talk about shape in a second, but outlier, center, and spread are fairly obvious from a box plot, right? The outliers are marked with an asterisk, the center is the median, and the spread, you can either talk about the IQR or you can talk about the range from minimum to maximum when you're discussing that, depending on the context. The shape of the box plot can be a little bit confusing if you're not used to it. So when we're looking at a distribution of data that is roughly symmetric, our box plot looks roughly symmetric, right? You see that the median is roughly equidistant from each of the quartiles, and the tails are roughly the same length. The whiskers are roughly the same length, right? Which means that if this were a curve, our tails would be the same length. In a right-skewed distribution, notice that we have a longer tail out to the right. The distance from the median to the maximum is much larger than the distance from the median to the minimum. There's way more variability out here, which means this is where our long tail would be. So this is right skewed. Similarly, in this box plot, my whisker is much longer out to this left side, so my distance from my median to my minimum is way larger than my distance from my median to my maximum, meaning this data set is going to be left skewed. There's going to be a long left tail. Next week you are going to be asked to make comparisons of box plots, and so sometimes you will see parallel box plots. And in a parallel box plot you have a quantitative variable being measured on one axis, and then you can measure different statuses or different things by using different box plots and just stacking them one on top of another. And that allows you to very easily compare the distributions of data. So here, if I asked you to compare the medians, it's really easy for you to see that the median of this underweight group is smaller than the median of the overweight group, and the normal group is somewhere, the median of the normal weight group is somewhere in between, right? So you may also see box plots drawn vertically, where you have the quantitative variable on the y-axis and the categories on the x-axis. That's fine. Either one is fine. Whichever one you prefer is totally okay. So the other thing I want to draw your attention to here is that your outliers, notice your outliers here are drawn as circles, not as asterisks. That's completely fine. So now I want you to do the check your understanding question from page 59 in your notebook. Don't forget to check those answers before you do your check for understanding.